Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're taking a look at a ultra budget micro ATX case with a little bit of RGB bling. This is the First Player DK-D3-A. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at the First Player Gaming. This is the DK-D3-A, which is a kind of a slight incremental change on the original D3, which some of you may have seen already. So what does this bring to the table? So this brings to the table a micro ATX form factor, which is really flexible, will allow you to install up to 190mm CPU coolers, up to 340mm graphics cards in both vertical and horizontal plane. Comes included with a 200mm addressable RGB fan on the front, 140mm addressable RGB fan on the rear, a swing out door with glass and a little handle, and some other really nice features such as a fan controller, although the fan controller isn't great, but we'll take a look at that a little bit later on. But overall, this at the moment, for around about £37 here on amazon.co.uk, this actually is a terrific bargain. So we'll go through, do an unboxing, go through the features, have a bit of a teardown, and then we'll come back with my final thoughts. We won't be doing any stats in this, such as airflow tests or doing a build in it, that'll come later, but certainly this will give you a good feeling for whether or not this case is suitable for your build. So let's get into it. So starting off with the case itself, obviously you can see this is a micro ATX form factor. On the front we've got this really nice mesh section with a kind of, I'm not entirely sure how you describe the panel section around it. It's got a kind of futuristic, kind of almost like an Iron Man-esque view to it. So when you've got the fan illuminating in the front, you've got the chest piece going and you've got the armour around it. So yeah, it's not entirely plain. It's got a little bit of bling to it, and also you can tell from some of the pictures and some of the B-roll, hopefully the lighting isn't particularly good in here, but you can tell that the actual kind of accents around the side here are like a gunmetal grey, whereas the rest of it is all finished in either gloss black or matte black finish. The front panel itself is wire mesh and the surroundings are plastic, but other than that the rest of the build is pretty much a-okay with pretty much metal throughout. So let's take it apart and see what we actually get inside. So this is the bit that Kath normally doesn't like when I swing this open, and possibly you'll see in a reflection, but luckily I've done some B-roll already so she doesn't need to duck out of the way on this one. So what we've got is this really nice finished handle on the side there with a little ring pull, and pretty much like a can of Coke you can just pull it and open it. It is actually fastened on magnets, so no screws required, and it slots into place rather nicely. The glass, as you can possibly make out, has got a very, very slight smoke tint and has got black edging around the outside, so if you do tend to touch it when you're pushing it back, then you're not going to get greasy prints all over it, so pretty easy to maintain and look after. It does actually kind of rotate pretty much all the way around, back to about there, so plenty of room for access inside the chassis should you need to do any work, maybe tidying up your graphics card or even just giving it a quick vacuum out, which potentially you may have to do due to the mesh on the front being the only real filtration for the incoming air that we've got in this case. The glass panel itself comes off very easily. It's on these little pillars, so yeah, that's nice and easy to take off should you want to do some further maintenance. So I think the best thing to do now is if we take off the back panel, so then we can just let some light through for later on, we'll take a look at the wiring situation and the ease of use inside from the rear. So the rear section is held on with 2 thumb screws, nice and easy, and the panel is only actually clipped in on the front, so for some people that may help out with wire and cable management if you have to kind of compress it in the suitcase style, but there is actually quite a lot of depth there, so you shouldn't have too many worries. They have thought about cable management pretty well in this particular design. It is actually very, very similar to the Kolink Citadel, so if you've seen that video or if you've not checked it out yet, then maybe check that one out. Link will be provided up there. That is a very similar setup. Essentially the chassis, the structural components are pretty much identical. The things that differ is the front panel and the mesh, and also the included fans, whereas the Citadel comes with options either no fans, or you can have 2 140s up front or 3 120s, I believe it is. Also the fan controller is a little bit different as well, but still not perfect. So looking at the cabling, so what have we got here? So all the cables are nicely blacked out right to the very ends. So one of the main cables we've got here is the USB and front audio connections, which are again pretty decent length, so they should stretch to pretty much anywhere on the motherboard. Next up we've got our front panel I/O connections, so that's the usual thing, so you've got your hard drive LED, you've got your power LED, reset, etc, etc, power on. There is actually an additional cable here, which is for controlling the addressable lighting. So with the hub installed, you can connect this up to the hub and then use the button on the front of the case to control the addressable RGB fans. If you want to, you can obviously dismiss that altogether and just connect the controller straight to an addressable RGB header on your motherboard. So that supports the 5V 3-pin addressable RGB. Next up, we've got our USB 3.0 port. So this, sadly, on this case is only a single USB 3.0 on the front, but I think for most people that's going to be absolutely fine. It is accompanied by two USB 2.0 ports, so you've got 3 ports in total, which pretty much should suit most people. Most people tend to put in things like maybe a wireless dongle for a headset, or maybe some kind of Bluetooth receiver. If you want to do some fast data transfer on a USB 3 hard drive or USB stick, then the single port should be more than enough. Other connections we've got are for the fans, so there's 2 connections coming out from the fans, so one in the front, one in the rear. Sadly, this is one of the downsides of the case, although again at the price point, this is totally forgivable. So it's got a proprietary 5-pin connection there. Potentially, those of you that are kind of have the ability, you could always split those cables down into the kind of PWM and also the addressable RGB, should you feel the need to. I think most people probably won't, they'll just plug it straight into the hub, which we'll take a look at now. So the hub itself is actually held on with magnets in the back there, so that's nice and easy. No worries about sticky residue from stickers, that kind of thing. And you can plug in up to 8 fans on this particular hub, plus 2 LED strips. I haven't seen these LED strips for sale anywhere, so you may need to keep your eyes out for those, or maybe head over to the First Player Gaming website and see if you can find anything on there. I certainly haven't at the moment. Looking at the connectivity, this is where things do go slightly wrong yet again. Unfortunately, the RGB box is powered by a Molex connector, which I guess in some cases is absolutely fine because it's one of those connectors that you never use, so you can't have a dedicated line going from your power supply. But if you're looking for that ultra neat and tidy build, having the extra Molex connection on there, yeah, it's not brilliant. Should be SATA really in this day and age. Also as well, if you're one of those people that kind of tweaks and tinkers with your PC being on, if you disconnect a Molex whilst the PC is on, bad things can happen, whereas with SATA, of course, it's hot plug and play. Other connectivity on the hub is our fly lead, so that plugs into your motherboard, so that's the 5V addressable RGB. And the last one, there's a kind of extension on there for the plug, which goes from the RGB light on the front into the unit itself. So it's just a standard 2-pin connection, which fits into there, but they have given you this extension, so if you want to maybe put this in somewhere slightly more out of the way, and the actual cable from the switch itself isn't long enough, then they do give you this kind of odd extension. Slightly strange, but could potentially become useful for some people. So that's the RGB hub. Again, it's magnetic, so you can put it pretty much where you want to. On the back there probably seems to be the best option. Or alternatively, there is a drive cage underneath, so you could, if you want to, just attach it to the top of there just to get it out of the way a little bit more. So let's take a slightly closer look at what is going on actually inside here. So as you can see in the bottom, we've got a drive cage, which is removable, a couple of screws on the bottom, so you can remove that should you wish to. You can put a 3.5-inch drive in there on the bottom and also on the top, or if you want to on the top, you can put in a 2.5-inch drive. The holes are there for both. These days with more modern drives, with the M.2s, these are becoming less and less popular, but certainly if you've got a slightly older drive and you want to make use of it in your budget build, then certainly you can do. Power supply area, plenty of room for any power supply in there, even ones which have got captive cables. Obviously modular ones are going to give you even more room, but certainly plenty of room for any power supply in there. And there are on the bottom some rubberized pads on there just to take some vibrations out of the power supply. On the very bottom as well, there is a filter, but we'll take a look at that a little bit later. So for the back, that is pretty much it in terms of facilities. Obviously we've got a massive cutout here for CPU coolers, and there's various cutouts in various places for wiring routing, which is all very nice, and there's some tie down points that you can cable tie your cables down to. So yeah, I think pretty much in the back there, as it was with the Citadel, pretty much every base is covered here. Inside the packaging there are some spare screws and some cable ties for cable management, and also there's some additional motherboard pillars, so if you've got a motherboard which is slightly wider on the micro ATX side of things, then there are some additional pillars which you can install. Moving around to the back of the case, now we can see our 140mm addressable RGB fan. Again, the fans are static speeds, which I probably didn't touch on a great deal. The fans are statically controlled, so there's no fly lead to connect to a PWM connector for fans. So literally you plug them in and they spin at the speed that they want to spin at. From what I can tell, the rear fan spins it around about 1000 RPMs, and the front fan, the 200mm one, spins it somewhere in the region of about 600 to 700 RPM. Certainly they're not silent, but they are extremely quiet, so it isn't going to be an issue, and they're no louder than anything else, maybe like a power supply, that kind of thing. So they're not going to be distracting, but obviously you're lacking control. So moving on, we've got our I/O cutout here, which is all nicely done, no cut fingers to speak of. And also we've got our PCI Express blanking plates there. Sadly, these are captive ones, so if you do want to take them out, you have to bend them out and they won't go back in. They are disposable. Not the end of the world, but certainly would have been nice to have seen removable ones or replaceable ones. On the side here, we've got our vertical GPU mounting. So if you want to mount a GPU in here vertically, you certainly can do. There are 2 bays for that. And those also are captive as well. So once you've bent those out, sadly, they won't go back in. So if you do change your mind, you will have to find some of these blanking plates somewhere. But again, not the end of the world. This bit does actually come out, so there's a screw in the top there, so you can take that whole section out, although I don't really understand why you'd want to, but certainly it is an option. I guess really it's more for gaining access to the screws if you're mounting them in the kind of horizontal style. Not perfect, but certainly gets the job done. Another thing, which is again the same as what happened with the Kolink, if you've got the 140mm fan in there, it is going to obstruct if you're trying to put a vertical GPU in there. So there are some compromises here. I think most people in this kind of case are probably going to mount it in the traditional horizontal style, but certainly if you do want to do a vertical mount in here, you are going to need to buy a cable, a fly lead to go from your motherboard to the graphics card, and also obviously you may have to replace this rear 140mm fan. If you're spending around about £37 on a case, whether or not it's going to be one of those things where you can just throw away the fans and put in your own fans, again, that is down to the individual end user. If you like the style of the case, but the fans don't do it for you, then certainly it is an option. And even with relatively cheap RGB fans, replacements 120s in the back there, it's still going to be a relatively cheap build overall. So let's move around to the inside. So as you can see, plenty of room, like we've seen pretty much from behind. So you've got the massive cutout for your CPU area. All the markings are clearly done there for micro ATX or ITX, should you want to put an ITX in there. Plenty of cable routing, and the basement section is fully solid. There are some pass-throughs in convenient places for HD audio in this corner and your USBs, USB 3, that kind of thing on the bottom there, so yeah, no issues there. I actually like this design, not having any mesh or anything. It makes it actually easier to clean, because obviously you can just give it a wipe over in one fell swoop. Really, really good. There is a cutout on the bottom here, so you can see your power supply should you want to. This again is a bone of contention, whether or not it's a good thing on a case in this kind of price point. I think if you're spending that little amount of money actually on a PC case, the chances are you're going to not be spending a great deal of money actually on your power supply. So maybe you don't want to see the power supply. Not the end of the world, but certainly worth noting. There is also a First Player Gaming logo on here, which they've sprayed on. That actually will come off relatively easily, so if you don't like that and you want to get rid of it, then certainly you can do. That is actually the only branding on the entire case, so if you want to give your case a sense of anonymity, then yeah, you can cover that or get rid of it pretty easily. So let's take a look at the top of the case. So on the top, we've got the usual kind of deal here. So we've got this removable magnetic filter for mesh. That really is more for stopping dust getting in the case rather than doing anything really productive. If you're mounting a AIO in here and you want to get the best out of it, then probably you're best off removing that anyway, just to let the airflow out. Traditionally, this would be an exhaust section, so a bit pointless filtering the exhaust, but certainly put it on when you finish using the PC to stop anything dropping inside it. You have got tons and tons of room here. Like we said, you can fit up to 190mm CPU cooler in here, so obviously that gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of mounting radiators. So this will take a 240 or 280mm AIO. The 280, they don't specifically say on the website or actually in any of the documentation, but certainly depending on your VRM situation in your motherboard and also RGB RAM height, then there's a very strong chance you can get a 280 in there. If you're using something like the Arctic Freezer 280, you might struggle a little bit, being that that one is a little bit more chunky, but certainly most of the kind of normal thinner radiators should be absolutely fine. Moving up to the I/O on the front, so we've got a clicky power button. Next to that, we've got a reset button, and then we've got our LED button for cycling through the LEDs, which you've possibly seen from B-roll already. USB 2.0 ports, a headphone jack, a separate mic jack, and then a USB 2.0 port. And last of all, we've got our USB 3.0 port. So pretty decent I/O section, again, almost identical, if not exactly the same as the Kolink Citadel. Next up, we'll take a quick look at the base section. So we've got Plastic feet on there, yeah, not brilliant, but it gets the job done. They have put rubber pads on the bottom, so that's great for not leaving marks and also dampening some of the noise and vibration going through the system. You've also got access to the 2 screws there to remove the drive cage, and you can also remove the filter on the bottom for the power supply. Not the best of filters, just one of those normal mesh ones, but yeah, gets the job done. So now let's take a look at the front of the system again. So again, we've got this mesh front on here. The panel itself comes off relatively easy. It just needs a tug on the front, so I'll do that now. It is held on pretty well. So front panel just pops off and then you can get a closer look at what's going on inside. Sadly, there isn't enough room on this one to install the Noctua 200mm fans. I have tried. Still is not going to happen. One day I will find a case which actually fits those darn fans and get some use out of them. But sadly, much like the Citadel and all the cases that have come before it, nothing I can use actually fits with those 200mm fans. But fortunately, they have installed one straight away. So we've got this 200mm fan, again, static speed. It basically gets the job done. It is in the direct line of the mesh on the front, so there's no restrictions on airflow. You haven't got to go through any kind of crazy 90-degree bends or anything. And it's actually been positioned in a pretty decent way. Airflow isn't spectacular in any way, but again, gets the job done. It is a static speed, so around about kind of 600 to 700 RPM. Not very loud. You can detect a very minute clicking from both of the fans. They are relatively cheaply made, but again, this is a cheap case with those fans, with that amount of cooling. Obviously, if you want to, you can take this fan off, the 200mm fan. You can replace it with either 3 120mm fans, 2 120mm fans, 2 140mm fans, and yeah, various other combinations. You've probably seen from some of the cutaways, the blank section there, so you can put in what you want there. When it comes to radiators in the front, sadly, it's going to be limited to, I think, a 240, maybe a 280, depending on your brand and the design. 240 is going to be absolutely fine. I would say again, judging by the price of this and the kind of intended market, most people are going to just get their system, put the bits in here and kind of be done with it. It is absolutely fine. The airflow is pretty decent. Again, 200 mils going in, 1400 going out. So you've got a relatively positively pressured system in there. And the fan does seem to actually generate some airflow in the bottom basement as well as in the main section. So yeah, I don't see any problems there at all really. So I think what we'll do is now is I'll get the power supply out and we'll fire these fans up so you can take a good look, although you've probably seen it from some of the B-roll already, but hey, what the heck, let's go through it anyway. Okay, so there we go, we're back and we've got it powered up. Well, at least we've got a cheap power supply installed just so we can get the MOLEX connector to get the fans going. And if I get close, you can hopefully hear it. It isn't really a great deal of noise, just the kind of the movement of air. And from further away you probably can't pick up at all. With my head being positioned here, I've got a PC there and this, and actually that is louder even though that is further away. So it is pretty much essentially silent. It's not completely silent, it's not 0 dB or anything like that, but it's not distracting. It certainly isn't any louder than the kind of ambient noise within the room really. So yeah, it looks pretty decent. Again, you can, if you want to, you can swap these fans out should you wish to. We'll cycle through some of the RGB lighting effects. There aren't a huge amount on here, and as with most of these cheaper controllers, they kind of don't always work as intended. So you've got this one which yeah, just cycles through colors and kind of turns itself off. Yeah, it's a slightly bizarre controller where it just, almost every setting apart from the Unicorn Puke, there's a section where it kind of turns itself off. Oh, then it adds. So yeah, it does some slightly bizarre things. And I guess that's building up as it goes through. So again, down to the individual, but there certainly are some options there you can choose. So we'll try the next one, which is going to be virtually the same kind of thing, I think. So that is doing the same, but I think in probably just red. No options to speed up or slow it down, anything like that. It literally is just a button press, and that will change it. Although, if I press it twice, yeah, that doesn't seem to do much else other than change the setting. So yeah, kind of slightly odd settings there. I don't think there's any static colors. I didn't actually get that far through it. Oh, there we are. So we have got some static colors. Again, the camera doesn't always pick this up because of the way the camera handles the ISO. Essentially, the center section here is better illuminated than the outside blades. They don't diffuse that well into the rest of the blades as they do on the one in the back. So the one in the back uses essentially the same LEDs, but because it's a much smaller fan, it looks that much better. So we've got usual kind of color schemes there, and flowing into different colors. It's kind of nice. It's a little bit different. I'll put the front panel on now. I'll snap it into place so the camera will probably rock itself. Actually, before I put this on, you'll notice on the bottom there is a grab handle. So if you're not sure which way it goes up, because it is kind of universal almost, it will fit in both ways. So yeah, just make sure that section is on the bottom. I have made that mistake already and put it on and then realised after. So it does fit on actually very nicely, and now you can see what it looks like behind the mesh. Actually makes the blades look a little bit better. I think it must reflect some of the light back onto the blades. And again, I like the way that all of this changes colour in the different lighting, so it's got a nice kind of metallic feel to it. And the mesh seems to do a good job pulling air through there. Again, that is your only level of filtration in this, so if you're in a particularly dusty environment, then it would have been nice for them to include maybe another one of these to actually sit behind. Again, having 2 layers of mesh isn't particularly great for airflow, much better for filtration. The fan, being a 200mm, doesn't have a great deal of static pressure, so I think this is going to be absolutely fine. Because it's a slower spinning RPM fan, it's not really going to be kind of sucking in all that dust as a 120 or 140mm will. So yeah, works out pretty well. Got some more RGB themes there, and I think we're back to then our rainbow puke background again. If you want to reset it, if you press and hold, then that will switch to the RGB mode from the motherboard. So for switching between, if you've got an RGB header, or sorry, addressable RGB header I should say, press and hold it once again, and it goes back into the previous mode. I think if you want to reset it, I think you press and hold it. Yeah, wait for that double flash. No, maybe not. So you'll have to cycle through if you want to find your specific lighting. The white LEDs are actually pretty decent on the that kind of setting. Yeah, from that angle there, very, very Iron Man-esque in look, in my opinion. Anyway, that's pretty much it, I think, for the First Player Gaming DK-D3-A. Let me know in the comment section what you think of it. Is this something that you're planning on getting? Is it something you've got already and you just wanted to check out reviews just to make sure that the case you bought wasn't an absolute lemon? And actually, I've got to say, if I was to give this a score out of 5, it's got to be a definite 4, maybe 4.5. The only things for me which personally let it down is those removable PCI Express brackets on the back, which isn't really a deal breaker, and possibly I would say the RGB controller not having fan speed control on there, especially kind of in 2021, is something which we kind of expect, but certainly does the job. It's still very quiet. It's still going to push through a considerable amount of air. So for most builds, I think it's going to be absolutely fine. I'm actually going to be using this case to try and sell a PC which hasn't sold yet. I've got a PC which I'm selling on Facebook Marketplace. People keep on asking me to knock off crazy amounts of money. I don't think it's personally overpriced. I think what might be holding it back is the case. So we're going to do a case swap in a live stream. So if you want to see how that goes, make sure you click on the subscribe button and the chime icon and you'll be notified of future video releases. I think that's going to pretty much wrap this one up. So I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.